Today at T-Mobile, I'm joined by a special co-anchor.
What up, everybody? It's your boy, Big Snoop Deal Double G.
Snoop, where can people go to find great deals?
Head to T-Mobile.com and get 4 iPhone 16s with Apple Intelligence on us, plus 4 lines for $25.
That's quite a deal, Snoop. And when you switch to T-Mobile, you can save versus the other big guys' comparable plans plus streaming.
Respect. We up out of here.
See how you can save on wireless and streaming versus the other big guys at T-Mobile.com/switch. Apple Intelligence requires iOS 18.1 or later.
Get ready for Netflix's gripping new medical drama, Pulse. Set in a cutting-edge Miami trauma center, third-year resident Dr. Danny Sims is unexpectedly thrust into a promotion when beloved chief resident Dr. Xander Phillips gets suspended. Then, with the emotional and physical stakes at their highest, a storm will push the hospital and its residents to their limits. Witness how life can change in a heartbeat when you're operating under pressure. Watch Pulse April 3rd, only on Netflix.
The #1 selling product of its kind with over 20 years of research and innovation. Botox Cosmetic, onabotulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
At Patron, we craft our tequila using high-quality natural ingredients without additives. No sweeteners, no extracts, no secrets. In fact, Patron's secret ingredient is that we have no secret ingredients. Just 100% additive-free tequila, made with 100% Weber Blue Agave, water, and thyme. Patron, 100% additive-free tequila. Visit patrontequila.com to learn more. The perfect way to enjoy Patron is responsibly. Copyright 2025, imported by Patron Spirits Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Tequila 40% ABV.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Hey there, Duke fans. Welcome to episode number 711 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We are back. No more emergency time, but we're still talking Duke basketball as Duke takes out the Arizona Wildcats in the Sweet 16, and a Elite Eight date with Alabama looms. That was a tongue twister that I did not think I would put myself into, but we did it anyway. I am Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. I have Jason here with me. Jason, I'm tired. I know you're tired because you had a busy day at work. I'm tired because I did not get as much sleep as I thought I would, but we are here.
Yes, we are here, and any energy that was lacking moments ago from not much sleep last night and from a long day at the office is gone, or I should say the energy is now lifted. Yes. The lack of energy is gone. Excited to talk about a really, really exciting, really great game last night for the Blue Devils, and also look ahead to Elite Eight matchup against Alabama.
Yeah, the 25th Elite Eight that Duke will have appeared in all time. That is third all time, I think, amongst teams. But we will get into that later. Let's talk about the Arizona Wildcat game. We will start with our headlines, and we got 9 billion of them. And a lot of them were terrific.
Hey, this was a record. I didn't count, but it's well over 100.
You keep saying record. I don't even know how many. I stopped counting at 64. Let's just put it that way. There was more than that. And that's not counting people who submitted multiple, who came back in and said, oh, by the way, I have this other idea. We have a lot of them.
And by the way, I'm going to start with, I have a headline. I haven't done a headline in a long time. No one else did my headline. So here's my headline. We have Cooper, you don't.
That's a very simple one. A very simple one. I'm going to start with Chris Immershine. Chris Immershine, I thought, had a very clever one, and a jump scare to anybody who's going through this right now. We're not trying to make light of a situation, but he goes, Duke divorces Arizona in Sweet 16, citing the end of love as the reason.
Yeah, by the way, now that we're on the headlines, I did want to point out we had a number of people who, in writing headlines to us and in writing to us over the past couple of days, mentioned the loss of my dog Cameron. We had a bunch of folks who said Duke won this one for Cameron. People, I think I've responded personally to each and every one of those emails. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. It raises my spirits the way so many of you have embraced that. It's really sweet.
But I will say, I think one of my headlines kind of captured that, Jason. So I do want to read it from Paul Downing. He wrote, in honor of an incredible K9, Duke and its dogs propelled Duke past the Cats. And we had some dogs last night because we needed them.
I love it. That's beautiful. Thank you very much. Okay, so as I get to some of my headlines, Dawson Klein, Duke kills the Duke killer in dramatic fashion. Great reference there to Caleb Love, who had a very, very fine game.
Yes. Courtney Kruger, he writes it all the time. He wrote in Cats scratch and claw, but can't escape the coop.
I loved that one. That was really good. Chris Barry, who also writes in all the time, Duke's gut out win over the refs. Oh, and Arizona too.
Yeah. Jim Chartier, I'm gonna try and sing this, but he wrote in it's not a lyric. The headline is a lyric. It must have been love, but it's over now. Thank God.
Good job, Donald. I'm glad I saw that when I'm like, I'm not singing. I've sung before. I'm not going to sing if I can help it. Nick Soprano gave us the good Cooper Flagg, the bad Caleb Love, the ugly, the refs. The refs are going to be a theme here in the headlines.
Yes. Jim Blitch wrote Love Conquers All. Not this time. Again, we had a lot of Caleb Love ones. We have to use a few of them.
Dave Jordan, Caleb Love ended Coach K's career. Cooper Flagg returned the favor.
Thank you, Cooper, for that. Jared Strauss, with a little bit of New Jersey Turnpike geography, I've done this many times. Duke wins Sweet 16 by exit 15, which is where the Prudential Center is in Newark.
And I got two last ones I want to mention. First is Steve Van Dude. Steve, this is really good. His headline is simple: 3 down, 3 to go. Steve is looking ahead to San Antonio. I approve of that. And then I wanted to shout out the K-Man, David Kerman. He's been with us forever, Donald, on this podcast. Mm-hmm. The K-Man wrote to us and said, it's 5 a.m. I'm sitting in the LaGuardia airport. I'm on my way to Duke for my 40th reunion. And then he said, I'm too tired to come up with a headline. We love you anyway, K-Man.
His schedule sounded like mine. I went to the airport and I didn't get to go nowhere. I had to come back home. So I hope you have a safe trip. I know he's going down for his reunion. Everyone who's going down to reunion weekend this weekend, which is a little bit earlier than it normally is, enjoy it. It should be excellent on campus for that game on Saturday, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Jason, let's get to some of the good from this game. And we started it last night. We will say it again. Cooper Flagg is that real deal. I just want to repeat the numbers because we didn't really do a lot of stats, but I want to repeat these numbers. 30 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 blocks, and 1 steal with just 1 turnover. He had a 30. He was 2 blocks away from a 35-5-5 game, the likes of which I think they said Ed O'Bannon was the last person to even approach a 35-5 in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and look, we heard from so many people, the stats that Cooper put up have never been achieved before in the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament goes back to like the 1930s or something like that. There have literally been tens of thousands of players to play in the NCAA tournament, tens of thousands of games. I'm sure there have been tens of thousands of games over all these years. And no one has ever put up a stat line like what Cooper did. And to broaden it out a little bit, and by the way, John Fanta from the Field of 68, John Fanta pointed out, he said, by the way, we should not ignore the fact that this guy, when he's in the NBA draft in a couple months, will be the youngest player in the NBA draft. He's the second youngest player in all of college basketball. He is doing all this in what should be his senior year of high school. And And remember, age doesn't matter as much when you get to be like 23, 24, late 20s, early 30s. Age stops mattering as much. The fact that you're a year younger. But we're at a point now where the fact that Cooper's doing this against guys 5, 6 years older than him, it's a big difference. There's just a huge difference in the maturity, the experience, everything that a 22, 23, 24-year-old has over a guy who just turned 18 a couple months ago. It's almost scary to think about how good Cooper Flagg is going to be when age sort of stops mattering when he gets to be like 22. I mean, it's the notion that he would not be an all NBA player seems absurd at this point. And speaking of the youth, just really quickly, I wanted to mention it wasn't just Cooper Flagg. Duke has 3 freshman starters in a world where freshmen cannot win. Everyone in the country says you must be experienced. When we talk about Alabama, Donald, we talk about the fact that 4 of their top 6 players are 5th-year
graduate
25-year-olds. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in this era where freshmen cannot win, where relying on freshmen is a huge mistake, our 3 freshman starters combined for 63 points, 16 rebounds, 10 assists, and 7 blocks. What?
I know we'll do play of the game, and we've talked about one. I think what we talked about last night is probably my favorite for play of the game, but there obviously was a stretch at the end of the first half where Conkinipple hit a 3, and then of course Cooper Flagg hit that buzzer beater. And I just want to read what Cooper Flagg said in the press conference about that moment. And he just goes, quote, "Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great rebound by Mason just getting the ball. We were going through a little struggle at the end of that first half of coming up with the defensive rebounds. A huge rebound for him at the end of the first half to close it out. He hit me on a run, just went up and made a shot." End quote. After all that, right? He just literally was. Sometimes it goes back to just doing something that you're probably done a million times as a kid, shooting on your backyard, hoop. He just said, "I'm just going to go up and make a shot, see what happens." But that really energized the team. Obviously, energized him. Con Knipple, who was standing right next to him, he said that was an inflection point. And the fact that, despite the fact after last year, we said we're going to get older. And we have in many facets of the game. I think part of that maturity and that seasoning has been how quickly that these freshmen have become playing like veterans. Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, Common Malawach, Big Pat, Slim, they passed freshman year a long time ago, and on the court. And I think that kind of play is what helps this team function and make it where they can go up against. I mean, it's not like Arizona was a young team either, right? We've seen are just elder statesmen in this tournament, and this team finds a way to make maturity be the centerpiece because they're the ones that possess it.
Yeah, by the way, we got an email from Isaac Finkel, one of our listeners, who pointed out that when Caleb Love hit his huge shot in the Final Four to end Coach K's career, I mean, a huge moment in Caleb Love's career, a terrible moment for all Duke fans. Isaac pointed out that when Caleb Love did that, Cooper Flagg was in 9th grade.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, God,
he was 15 years old.
So. It's so crazy. I want to transition a little bit from just talking about Cooper to talking about the team's overall shooting. Duke in this game shot 60% from the field, 57, almost 58% from beyond the arc, 85% from the free throw line. It is the second consecutive game where Duke had a 60-50-80 shooting split. It's the first time in the history of the Duke basketball program that they have accomplished 60-50-80 in back-to-back games.
In any game, not like NCAA tournament, any games.
It was real. Look, and we needed every damn second of it. We needed every damn basket of it. But to see, Con went 2 for 2 from 3-point range. Sion was 3 for 4. Mason hit 1. Isaiah hit 1. Cooper went 3 for 5. To see Duke knock down 11 out of 19 threes and then see us get all those baskets inside. I mean, Man and Big Pat combining to go 9 for 11 from the field. Pat had one that was like a 4 or 5 foot hook shot, But other than that, every one of them were like right there at the rim.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we needed every damn one of them. It was just very impressive execution. One of the things that I think is worth noting, it wasn't just that. Look, you saw Alabama beat BYU in a game where Alabama was shooting out of their mind. Full credit to them, and we'll talk more about it. Uh, and Duke, you could go, oh, Duke shot out of their mind against Arizona. I don't know that that's the case because Duke was getting quality look after quality look after quality look. You did not see Duke taking lucky kind of shots. You didn't see them taking heavily contested kind of shots. I even thought the three-pointers. I'm trying to recall. Proctor maybe had one. There was contest for the most part. Every three-pointer that Duke took was wide open. Sion James went 3 for 4. Sion James, there wasn't a guy within 10 feet of Sion James on any of his three-point attempts. And
they like forgot about him on the floor.
Yeah. And I mean, sure, some of that is on Arizona, but some of that is on Duke for the quality of the execution, for making the extra pass again and again and again, for saying, I've got a good shot. He's got a great shot. He's the one who's going to take it.
And even when you had Cooper Flagg in the second half, really trying to establish position and get guys to the rack, he would end up half the times throwing the ball up in the air, and either a man would come down and dunk it, or it would be Big Pat when he was in the game. And so, I mean, the fact that we were able to share the ball, 20 assists on 33 made baskets, that's almost 61% assist rate. Points in the paint, Jason, really tell the story, 42-30. And you could see how we were able to get to the hole. And again,
That's
even
huge.
if it wasn't one of our guards going to the rack and getting layups, it was them passing it off to one of our bigs, and they were able to hammer it home. It was simply terrific how they've been able to do that. And then because of that, and I know it wasn't something that was conscious in Arizona's part, but any team, when you see a team go to the rack after that all the time, and then you see alley-oops and stuff like that, what do? You kind of pack the paint. You kind of try and contract your defense just ever so much to try and be just a couple steps closer, maybe a half step closer to be able to help when that happens again. And because of that, as you mentioned, Sion James left wide open for three. Tyrese Proctor left wide open for three. Con Knipple left open in the corner for three. Mason Gillis hits a three. Like, you are able to just make it where they have to choose their battle. And their hope was that we would get cold at some point when we were shooting threes, and we didn't. I thought that was terrific.
I want to talk about the team's poise for a moment. And look, when we get to the bad, we're going to talk about the refs a little bit. But John Shire praised the way this team stayed poised when they got in foul trouble. Because I noted at one point, I want to say with about 7 minutes left or so, that Cooper Flagg had one foul, and every other starter plus Big Pat. So essentially, our four starters plus our sixth man, because those are the guys who are getting most of the minutes at this point. We've seen Isaiah's minutes and Caleb's minutes diminish fairly significantly, and even Mason Gillis didn't have huge minutes in this game. But sort of the six top minute getters on the team, five of them had three fouls. I was just like, oh, this could be a real problem down the stretch. But John Shire said, our guys showed togetherness. They showed poise. They're not afraid. He said, you hope to recruit that, but until they get here, you don't really know it. He said, I have a bunch of guys who are killers. They're fearless. They're not afraid of the moment. And they knew how to not get in more trouble once they'd gotten in some foul trouble.
Yeah, I think, and also, right, I think the rotations that we had, everyone kind of understood what they needed to do. I mentioned last night that they didn't shy away from the moment, right? They didn't, the pressure that was building, they walked right into it and tried to take it head on. And that is why, when you think about it, despite the fact that it felt closer towards the end, I don't think they got within 5 points the rest of the way. And so, again, every single time that it looked like Arizona was about to make that shot, or Caleb Love was going to make a shot that was going to make it where the momentum was going to be too much to overcome, we would knuckle down and make a play, whether it was a defensive stand or whether it was making a shot on offense or making free throws. This team was able to walk up to that pressure and do that. Jason, the last thing I had in the good that I really wanted to make note of is the fact that we were able to do most of that. I think we got the boost from Malik Brown playing. He played just a few minutes in this game, and all in the first half. But again, you could kind of see when he was out there, Arizona panicked for about 3 minutes. where there was a point where anytime that he was on defense on the perimeter, you saw them kind of back up towards the half court line to try and readjust what they were going to do because they're like, oh wait. And then there was times where he kind of, did this thing where he would bat the guys bat balls out of the air. The fact that again, he wasn't effective in the way that he normally is, and that's to be expected after being out for basically 3 of the last 4 months. Or I'm sorry, 3 of the last 4 weeks. But I do appreciate the fact that his boost really, again, made these guys kind of tune in on defense. And again, when we needed defensive stops, I know we allowed 93 points, but there were some times where we needed some defensive stops and we got them. And I think that boost of having Malik Brown back gave those guys a little bit extra to kind of say, okay, I know he's not 100%. We need to pick our guy up and we need to do the things that he normally does so that if we can only get a few minutes out of him, we can pick up the rest of the slack. And I think throughout that, there was times where obviously where that was a little bit loose, and that's credit to Arizona. But I do think our guys, had some defensive moments where they channeled that energy, the deflections, the steals, things like that, and just the tenacity. I've mentioned that before. We need a little bit more of that as we go along, but the tenacity that we continue to build in these games is why we're winning these games.
Look, the defense. It's weird to talk about the defense in a game where Duke gave up 93 points, far and away the most we've given up all year. I mean, the 42 points we gave up in the first half are the most we've given up in the first half all year, and then we gave up 51 in the second half. It was like, oh my God. But Duke has 7 blocks in this game. Man and Cooper both really did a nice job of preventing Arizona from getting anything inside. And as we noted on the Instant Recap podcast last night, and my God, folks, if you haven't listened to that, please take 10 minutes and listen to Donald and I celebrate and have a good time with that emergency podcast. As we noted, Man made perhaps the play of the game when Duke was up 6 with 2.5 minutes left, and Caleb Love went up for a 3-pointer, and Man blocked it, and Duke got the rebound. It was a huge moment, huge moment. And then he had another one about a minute later when he was playing defense one-on-one on Henry Visar, and he refused to go for any fakes, and he made him take a difficult shot that Visar missed. And I just, Man only had 6 rebounds. It felt like every rebound he had was huge.
Yeah.
A really, really tough game from him, battling on the inside and making the right plays at the right moments.
Jason, let's shift to the bad real quickly. I want to start with the fact that one of my things to watch and the things that I wanted us to not do was make Caleb Love be the main character. I wanted him to not be. I basically said something to the effect of, I hope the only time we hear his name is when they announce him in the starting lineup, and that's it. That clearly was not the case. He had 35 points, hit 5 threes. He got to the line. The stat sheet says he only shot 9 free throws, but I think that's a typo. I think it was more like 99 because it felt like he went to the free throw line
especially in the first half. Man, the first half.
First half, they were like, "Oh, he's on a tear. He has 15 points." I'm like, "Yeah, he has 8 points from the line. Like he made 2 baskets and like 8 free throws, and all of a sudden he had 15 points." But no, I think the idea is that he kind of felt right that there was a point where he had hit like 16 straight points for Arizona, and he was single-handedly at some points keeping them alive to maybe will the rest of his team to mount this comeback that they were trying to do. But again, we knew that was going to be one of the things we needed to do. And Caleb Love had a great game, but we were not able to get it done with him.
Donald, I want to mention about Caleb Love that there was I think a pretty significant moment in the first half when Caleb Love hadn't really been going off yet. And Tyrese Proctor and Mason Gillis got a little bit confused on a switch, and it allowed Caleb Love to be kind of wide open for a 3-pointer that he buried. And I think that was a moment that he then kind of took off a little bit. But the other thing about Caleb Love is, as part of him being the main story, as you put it, arguably, one of the 5 biggest moments in the game was Caleb Love choosing, after Arizona had executed perfectly, so they would have a 2-for-1 clock at the end of the first half. Caleb Love chose to take a bad, contested, long 3-pointer with 10 seconds or so left on the clock when he didn't need to. at the very end of the first half. And as a result of him missing that shot, it gets ping-ponged around a little bit. Gillis comes up with the rebound, feeds it to Flagg. Flagg then hits that three-pointer. As a result of him doing that, Duke gets 3 extra points. If you think 3 extra points didn't matter in this game, you're crazy. As much as Caleb Love was the main story because of his offense, that is a boneheaded play. That is one of the dumbest plays I've seen a player make on a college basketball floor. And I think he only did it because Con Knippel had just hit a 3, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to show you. I can hit a 3 the same way you can," as opposed to looking at the clock and recognizing time and situation. It was a huge, huge moment. And as great as Caleb Love is, and as much as he can win you games single-handedly, and boy, he almost did, he'll do that on you every now and then. You know, if I was an Arizona fan, I would have no hair left from pulling it out from watching Caleb Love.
I mean, not anymore, because you don't have to watch Caleb Love play anymore. I'll say the other main thing I had in bed, there's a little, some quirky stuff, but the main thing I want to get across is that Arizona got 12 offensive rebounds. We talked all week about how the fact that we want to limit Arizona on the offensive glass. But I think what was important about the fact that they got 12 offensive rebounds is a lot of them led to and ones or fouls, where they were able to convert at the free throw line. The reason why they were able to get to the free throw line quite a bit in the first half, especially, and even some down the stretch, was they were able to get offensive rebounds and then try to convert them very quickly, and we were caught out of position. We'll talk about some of the calls. Some of them were questionable, but at the end of the day, the idea is that when we miss those offensive rebounds, it puts us out of position for us to be able to react. And usually we do a pretty good job about, get like against Baylor, right? They had so many offensive rebounds, but they didn't really capitalize on a lot of them. Arizona was able to capitalize on more because of the fact they were able to get to the free throw line as a result of us being out of position. And that's where, we can clean that up quite a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, we're sort of alluding to it here. So I'll go ahead and tell folks, so many of you wrote to us about the referees and about your frustration and anger at what you felt was a one-sided or a game that was poorly called. I share those frustrations. We're going to deal with that directly in just a couple minutes. We have someone who's going to be joining us who is a college basketball referee. And he's going to explain to you things that maybe you missed that he saw, and also explain to you whether or not he thinks the refs in this game did a good job and whether they deserve to move on and referee continued games in the NCAA tournament. But before we get to any of that, I did want to comment on one thing somewhat related to the refs, which was I thought these announcers did Duke no favors whatsoever. Brian Anderson and Jimmy Jackson. Brian Anderson on play-by-play, Jimmy Jackson doing the color commentary. I don't want to say they were openly biased, but it definitely felt like they were rooting for Arizona and rooting against Duke, and that they were almost complaining about how the game was going at times. Joseph Kutcha, who's one of our emailers, said, a lot of people say, oh, Duke was playing 5-on-8 because of the refs. He said it felt like Duke was playing 5-on-10 because of the refs and the announcers. There was a moment where Brian Anderson said, I forget what the play was. It was, late in the second half. And you know what? It was the play where they called a foul on Cooper Flagg where the ball went out of bounds and Cooper probably hadn't committed a foul. And it would have been Duke's ball. And Brian Anderson, that wasn't, anyway, whatever.
No, it was a foul call. It was a foul call that happened.
Yeah, whatever the play was, Brian Anderson said, oh, Arizona feels like they just got a call. As if they hadn't been getting
it. Let's be clear. He said, and Arizona finally feels like they got a call.
That was, yes, fine. And I
finally is what grinds my gears. Go ahead.
I lost my mind. I was like, they have been calling Duke for touch fouls. They've been letting Arizona go over the back the whole damn game. And you're like, finally got a call? It was super frustrating. I know all of you out there felt it the same way we did, because we got numerous emails complaining about the officials, and my phone was just lighting up with text messages from people who were like, what's going on with the refs? What's going on with the announcers? Anyway, we can't do the bad without mentioning it was frustrating for Duke fans.
Well, prepare to be more frustrated because Brian Anderson, Jim Jackson, and Elliot Forrest will be on the call for the Duke game against Alabama on Saturday. So just get your Maylocks going right now. Get your Toms ready. But yeah, I am not as, we've had games where, go back and forth and whether we thought there were questionable calls from the actual referees, of which a couple of them have reffed Duke games this year. One has reffed several Duke games this year. So they are familiar with how people play Duke. So I'm not necessarily as concerned about that as I am more concerned about the broadcasters and how they deliver that narrative to everyone else. Because my phone was blowing up, not necessarily with Duke people saying that we were jobbed or that the refs were bad, but more from people who don't like Duke or people who are fans of other teams who said, oh, Duke got every call. And I'm like, just take a look at the number of fouls and the fact that they've been shooting, one-on-ones and the double bonus since about 10 minutes left in the game. So that is what, at the end of the day, the calls where Concanipple gets the drag down and they call a flagrant one on that. And then like a couple plays later, Pat does something similar and they call it a common foul. It wasn't the same, but they called two different calls on those two particular plays. And of course, the narrative at that point became Duke gets all the calls, despite the fact at that point, the foul disparity was so great.
Well, despite the fact that it was two very different circumstances. Pat did grab him and bring him down, and you could have called a flagrant one there, but it wasn't nearly the same as the Arizona guy who held Khan on the ground. So much so that Khan was signaling the ref. Khan was being held down and saying to the ref, like, hey, buddy, hello. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm still down here.
I'm still being held down here. And by the way, Arizona scored on the play. Like, the fact that they had trapped one of our defenders on the ground allowed them to score. So in any event, Donald, I know you're hosting.
Let's go to play of the game. Because we have to do play of the game and player of the game.
Oh yeah.
Play of the game for me is what we discussed last night. Man blocking Caleb Love's 3-pointer, and then I think what was the possession later, stonewalling Visar in the paint and grabbing the rebound. Those two defensive plays, I'm not going to consider two separate plays because those two plays are what held the game for Duke. That's my play of the game.
I have to go with Cooper's not half court, but logo 3 as the halftime clock is expiring, giving Duke breathing room at the end of the first half, although I could have easily picked the defensive plays you're talking about, and I was sorely tempted to take the no-look pass he made to Sion James for a wide-open 3.
Yeah, that was fun.
I mean, that was outrageous.
He looked right at an Arizona player and was like, guess what? Ball's over there. That was fun. And player of the game, Jason, can I guess it?
You don't need to guess, my friend. If you pick anyone but Cooper Flagg, you've lost your ever-loving mind.
I'm picking Duke's tenacity. But yes, I'm also picking Cooper Flagg. So we will leave it there. We have another game to preview. As Jason said, we have a special guest that will be joining us. But first, let's take a quick break. Everybody breathe. We'll be right back.
All right, Duke fans, when it comes to college basketball and March Mania, one thing is for sure, nothing is for sure. Upsets, buzzer beaters, Cinderella's advancing, top seeds going home early, we hope not. It's all gonna happen. Bet the unexpected every upset every day with DraftKings Sportsbook.
That's right, Jason. With live betting, exclusive content, promos, and parlays, DraftKings is the ultimate college basketball destination for March. And if it's your first time using it, we got something special for you. $5 for $200 in bonus bets instantly. It is a great deal for March.
Bet the unexpected with the DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code DUKEBB. That code again, DUKEBB, for new customers to get a $200 bonus when you bet just $5 only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
All right, we are back, and before we get to the Alabama preview, Jason, I know you have a friend on here who a Duke alum, former college referee, who's going to maybe shed some light on some of the things that we were discussing in the last half of the show.
Yeah, we want to welcome in now John Barrow. John is refereed at the D2, D3, NAIA level. He's been in sort of feeder systems for for larger NCAA Division I conferences. John is, as you said, Donald, John is a Duke alumni, and mostly when I talk to him, I'm talking to him about the Blue Devils, but he has some thoughts on refereeing because he's done it for many, many years. First of all, John, welcome. Thanks a lot for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor. Enjoy you guys a lot.
So, John, I want to start with that game last night where, as we said, our inbox was flooded with people who felt that the referees called it way too tight on Duke, and at the same time, they allowed Arizona to push, grab, hold, go over the back, and all the other kind of stuff. Were we watching the same game? Did you see it that way, or do you disagree?
So I think the fairest way to answer that is for me to talk to you about my own experience with the game. In the first half, I thought the officiating was fine. I was super frustrated with our guys because it was clear to me very early that it was going to take a big bump and a much smaller hold to draw a foul. And Arizona was bumping plenty, but they weren't grabbing us like we were grabbing them. And I thought that was a pretty obvious thing that our coaches and players should have recognized. So I was really frustrated at halftime that we'd accumulated so many fouls with just grabs, just silly, not keeping our hands to ourselves grabs. So at halftime, I'm not happy, but I wasn't griping at the officials. Second half, things get tense late. Obviously, I wasn't like there were some plays. Obviously, they were nuts. In the moment, right after the game, I knew a lot of Duke friends were frustrated, and I understood that. But when I woke up this morning and checked Twitter and saw the level of frustration and vitriol, I was kind of shocked. So I went back. I had to look at the tape again. I didn't have time to review the whole game today, but I did look at the last 15 minutes. And here are my thoughts. There were a couple of plays that I think had overwhelming impacts on our perceptions of the way things went. I want to talk you through the crazy con takedown that's no call, because everybody remembers the play. Everybody's frustrated that they didn't get that right in real time. How can that possibly happen? Let's start with the way the play happens. And just as sort of like an experiment, Jason and Donald, do you remember like what led up to can you recall what leads up to the con takedown?
Oh, I definitely do, because Cooper Flagg gets absolutely cleared out.
He does.
Okay. On a rebound.
Yes.
I thought the play should have been called dead ages ago.
It should have. And here's what I think happened. I think Bradley was the shooter, but it's not important. The ball goes up on the rim, and Cooper's going up for it, and then you got the Arizona player coming from behind, and then I think Bradley either Bradley or Adams was on the ground. And it looked to me first time like Cooper got wiped out by whoever was jumping for Arizona from behind. It looked like he just plowed him from behind, wiped him out. When I took a second look, that's not what sent Cooper flying. What sent Cooper to the ground was a shove from the guy who didn't leap. And my theory of the case is twofold. One, the ball stayed up on the rim forever. I don't know if you remember that part of the play, but it stayed up on the rim forever. And officials are trained, if at all possible, don't blow something that's not on the shooter or on the guy defending the shot while the ball is up on the rim. You want to try to let that play finish. Well, the damn play wouldn't finish because the ball stayed up there forever. And then with Cooper, what I think happened is you got two Arizona guys, and I think we just got really unlucky, and both officials were looking in the right general area, but neither one of them could tell exactly who did what. And it could even be that one of them is looking at the jumper for Arizona, realizes he didn't wipe out Flagg. Maybe Flagg flopped there. It's possible both guys were looking at that same rebounder and both just happened to miss the shove that actually was the far more obvious foul. But we're still not done with the craziness of the play and the difficulty of the play, because the ball comes down, it misses, and now there's the loose ball ends up in the corner. And now we get, if you're Duke, you're unlucky because the lead official probably paid too much attention to the ball in that situation. And the trail official on that same side of the court is supposed to be looking at the ball in that position. And the center official on the opposite side could very well not have had the angle to see to see the takedown. So long story, way too long story, a little bit shorter. It was a really, really hard play to call. As crazy as that sounds, it was a really hard play. And it could also be that the angles all conspired against fairness to prevent the most egregious act of the sequence from being seen until finally on review it is. But I think so much of the reaction from Duke fans is colored by that one play. How could you possibly miss that? It's so obvious. Yeah, it's obvious on TV. And 99 times out of 100, it would have been obvious to at least one of those officials on the floor. But between the ball staying up on the rim forever, Cooper being in that weird position where he's in the air and one guy looks like he wipes him out but doesn't, and this other guy with a much less obvious move actually does wipe them out. There's just so much going on, man. And it's not that the guys were incompetent. It's not that they were conspired against Duke. That was just a really crazy, difficult play.
So, John, bottom line, you feel like the game was officiated correctly. You don't have any great criticism.
Great criticisms. No, there were mistakes like the Blarge. That was bad. When we had the one official signal in a block and another a charge.
Yeah,
that's bad in a high school varsity game. That should not happen at that level, and that's not okay. And I guarantee you, the crew took heat for it after the game, and they didn't need to take heat to realize that it was a major mistake. Both of the guys involved in that play wish they had not given a signal and that they had communicated with each other better, so they didn't have to go with the double foul. There were mistakes, there were missed plays, but we can't lose sight of the fact that there were a ton of possessions. A ton of amazing athletes playing extremely hard in a knockout game. And that's hard. I'm not going to weigh in on who should or shouldn't advance. I wouldn't do that even if I'd seen all the games from the weekend, but not having, like, the Final Four roster is going to be decided based on performances for the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. So it would be doubly unfair to try to say any of those three does not deserve to advance.
In general, real quick, we talk about Duke games, and we've seen this over the last month or so, teams starting to play extra physical against Duke, and that leads to some of these criticisms as well when you have, just chippiness underneath the basket. How difficult is that to kind of officiate in general?
How hard, officiating at that level is really hard. That's why most of us don't get there. This isn't going to be a direct answer, but I want to talk about one spectacular Duke play last night, which I think ties in kind of nicely here. I know you guys remember the most beautiful of Cooper's alley-oops to where he, from the left wing, he ends up taking a dribble and making just kind of the weird sort of scoop, long, like 15 or 18-foot scoop pass. And I think it was Kaman that flushed it. You guys remember the play I'm talking about?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what happened right before Cooper got going in the direction of the basket?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay, so he got hassled, could very easily have been a foul called. And I think that virtually every player in America would have had a foul called if he had been the ball handler instead of Cooper Flagg. And I can almost guarantee you the reason there was no foul called there is because those guys know how good Cooper Flagg is, and they felt like Duke had a better chance of making something positive out of that play if they let it go let Cooper try to regain his balance, even though there was enough contact to clearly knock him off balance. The defender took himself out of the play. And I think it was a brilliant no call. And if there's a foul there, Duke doesn't get those 2 points. We as fans don't get those 2 points. We as fans don't get the experience of seeing one of the most spectacular plays of the Cooper Flagg season. And I give so much credit to the official, because I'm telling you, that was calculated. That's knowing who you're dealing with on the floor. So yeah, there have been times where it's not unfair to be frustrated and think, man, Cooper's taking so much contact. Why won't they give him a whistle? But so often it's because officials are trying to actually give him the best opportunity to produce for his team. And sometimes that means not calling a foul and giving him the chance to play through contact and finish with 2 or 3 points, rather than calling a foul and giving Duke the ball out of bounds.
So you're telling me, I'm a soccer guy. You're telling me we need to play advantage in college basketball.
That's exactly what good officials do.
I'm for that. I'm definitely for that.
That's exactly what good officials do. And just like in soccer, there are times when you just stop the game because you got to clean something up immediately. But yeah, advantage is a huge part of officiating in basketball.
All right, John, thanks a lot, man. We appreciate your expertise. I think Duke fans had hoped that we would hear a little more anger and frustration, but I get it. I get it. You are always level-headed, and I trust your opinion.
Thank you, sir. Enjoyed it.
All right, and our thanks to John Barrow for jumping on real quick to discuss some of this. Jason, I'm happy because he's saying we should play like soccer. We should have advantage. I'm all for that. But in seriousness, I think it kind of goes to he kind of broke down how difficult it is for officials to officiate Duke in particular, not necessarily Duke games, but Duke in particular, because of sometimes how we play or also how opponents play us.
Yeah, no question about it. And look, he made a great point. This is a very, very skilled Duke team. And sometimes the refs may go, you know what? If I blow a whistle, I'm not helping them out here. They're going to recover. They're going to be fine. I find John's perspective fascinating sometimes, because he does see things, because he's a ref, because he's a trained NCAA ref. He sees things that some of the rest of us just don't see in terms of, the angles and where the referee's attention is at that moment and stuff like that. It's interesting to hear.
I think also, if I'm John Shire, I'm hearing this and I go, hey, the best way the referee could help my team is by putting Cooper Flagg or a Con Knipple on the line where they're hitting 80-90%, and giving us almost, sometimes at least 1 or maybe 2 points. So it's always that back and forth between how officials officiate, how players play is going to continue. But we leave that in the past, Jason, as we move ahead to the big one, the Elite Eight tomorrow night, Saturday night, 8:49 p.m. Eastern Time, approximate start on on TBS and True TV. It will be on both channels, so you can pick which one you want to use for that particular broadcast. But the Alabama Crimson Tide await us. Jason, very quickly, let me tell you about who they've played. They're 28-8. They're 13-5. They finished third in the SEC. And the one thing about them is that they are battle tested. We could say that about a lot of the SEC teams, but Alabama in particular, they have top 50 wins. I'm not even going to list them all. They have like 15
dude, it
of
would
them.
take you all day to list.
It'd take me all day. But I'll say a couple of them that they've Houston. They've beaten Houston. Obviously UNC. They've beaten Kentucky 3 times. They've beaten at Auburn on the last day of the season. And to get here to the Elite Eight, they beat Robert Morris by 9, St. Mary's by 14, and they beat BYU 113-88, where they set a record for the most number of threes shot and made in the NCAA tournament game. 25 of 51, which is absurd. But I think the one thing, Jason, I mentioned, they started out facing 15 seed Robert Morris. Did you know that was the first time they faced a team outside of Ken Palm's top 50 since January 25th?
I mean, come on.
They have played nothing but excellent teams, so they're going to be ready, and Duke is going to need to play well to beat them. But let's talk about their very good offense, and then a little bit later, their defense, which is not as great, but still very solid.
Yeah, and actually, the first thing you have to talk about is the speed. The speed that Alabama plays.
Incredible. Yeah.
It is unbelievable. So Alabama is the fastest team in college basketball. They have the number 1 tempo. Their games average 75.2 possessions per game. 75 possessions per game. Donald, Duke averages just a shade under 66 possessions per game. 9 more possessions per game for Alabama. I mean, that's like an Alabama game is an extra, like, I don't know, about 6 or 7 minutes longer than a Duke game. I mean, these guys are going to play fast the whole time against you. They're going to try and speed you up, force you to make mistakes, and playing fast is what opens up the court for them. And that is how Alabama is able to do stuff like blow out BYU by, they could have named the margin and as they scored 100 and something teen points. Look, it'd be really easy to watch that blowout of BYU and think that this Alabama team is just a three-point shooting team. You would be wrong about that. In their opening game against Robert Morris, they only hit 6 3-pointers in the whole game. Against St. Mary's, they only hit 7 3-pointers. Want to know why they won those games, though? Because against Robert Morris, they shot 28 of 37, better than 75% on 2-point shots. Against St. Mary's, where they only hit 7 threes, they hit better than 56% of their 2-point shots. Yes, they shoot a ton of threes. But like when they beat Auburn, you mentioned this, when they beat Auburn in their season finale, they did it by shooting just 7 of 22 from 3, but they hit 28 out of 45 twos. They can beat you any number of ways. The metrics say that Alabama is the 4th best offense in the country. And yes, it starts from the outside, but everyone worrying about that 3-point ability opens it up for easier twos. They are good from 3. They hit like 35.5%, but not great. But they hit an outrageous 60.1% of their 2-point field goals. They're the 3rd best 2-point field goal team in the country. They are good at getting fouled and getting points from the free throw line. Not great, but good at it. The 2 things on offense they don't do a really good job of, they will, we talked about they get a lot of twos. They will challenge you inside, and you can block shots on them. It's kind of amazing for a team that hits such a high percentage of their 2-point shots. They got their shots blocked a tremendous amount. One of the 20 worst block shot percentages on offense for them in the entire country. And they commit a fair number of turnovers. They allow a lot of steals. But again, the bottom line is eventually they get to where they get a good shot. They get to where they, get open from 3. And that's how they're able to produce such a good offense, the 4th best offense in college basketball. They have the 27th best defense. Donald, you mentioned they're not nearly as good on D as they are on O. They don't get a lot of steals. They don't force a lot of turnovers. They actually have one of like the 10 lowest turnover rates in all of college basketball. What they do really well on defense, they guard the 3-point line. They guard it like crazy. Their opponents only hit 30% from the 3-point line. We saw BYU struggle. I mean, just like BYU was firing up like air balls from the 3-point line against Alabama again and again and again. Alabama's also really good at forcing you to go one-on-one. They don't give up a lot of assists. They force you to try and take difficult shots one-on-one, and they're playing the passing lanes so you don't pass the ball around a lot. It is worth noting they are a very deep and experienced team. 4 of their top 6 guys, I mentioned this earlier, in terms of minutes played, 4 of their top 6 guys are 5th-year seniors. These are guys who've been around, not just seniors, 5th-year seniors. These are guys who've been around college basketball for a long damn time. They are also deep. They'll play about 9 guys most games. And frankly, there's nobody on this team, even Mark Sears, even their All-American. There's no one on this team that's like irreplaceable. Donald, anything you saw on the metrics before I get into the players?
Yeah, a couple of things. The first thing is on offense. You mentioned the fact that they're very good and they have a tempo, but what tempo will allow you to do is turn the ball over quite a bit. They average 13 turnovers a game. Jason, what's your little metric there? Over under 12?
Well,
so there's a team.
Yeah,
that's
but it's worth noting if you're playing, 10% more possessions, the 12 becomes a 13.
They're right at it. So if we can keep them in the teens as far as number of turnovers, that's going to really help. I think the other thing on defense, I mentioned that they are pretty solid in some areas, but one place they are not is because, again, of this tempo, they give up a ton of points. They have given up over 100 points twice at Missouri, and then in the SEC tournament, they gave up over 100 points to Florida. And then Florida, during the regular season, had 99 points against them. The number of teams that have scored over 80 points is 21. 21 times they've allowed over 80 points a game. Jason, do you know how many times Duke has allowed over 80 points?
I think twice.
Last night. That was the only one where we played Arizona in 93 points. Every other team.
We didn't allow 80 points to Auburn?
Nope. 78
points. Oh, you're right. It
was
84 to 78. You're right. My bad.
Yes. There was only last night was the first time we allowed over 80 points in a basketball game. So again, this tempo and people have really talked about how this tempo might be something that Duke wouldn't want. But of course, as John Shires kind of said, there's times where they want to go fast. It's just that the other team would not allow them to do that. So if they're going to be rushing shots and missing them, and we can get rebounds and go, we're going to, scoring 80 points is something that is possible, right? And the idea would be to keep them under 80. But I think the idea is that Alabama is a team that will sacrifice their defense to try and score 100 points.
As I go through the players, I want you to think about something because I want you to answer this. Do you think Duke wants to play at Alabama's pace? Because Duke has been willing to run with teams lately. Mm-hmm. And, Duke has shown that they can play at a faster pace. But do they want to play at the pace of Alabama? I want you to think about that while I talk about Mark Sears and company. As I said, he is their All-American. He was a preseason All-American. He's one of the guys that lived up to expectations. I guess close to living up to that. A lot of folks thought he was going to be the player of the year. It was sort of him and Cooper Flagg were like the preseason player of the year candidates.
Yep.
And to say Sears faded and he was still a first team All-American, it's not fading very much.
I think Sears' issue was more Jani Broom emerging as opposed to him doing any sort of regression.
Yeah, exactly. Mark Sears on the season, he's their point guard. He averaged 19 points per game, 5.1 assists per game, hit nearly 35% of his threes on high volume. This is another guy who took more than 200 three-pointers on the season. He is just 6'1", 190. And I think that if Duke guards can be a little bit physical with him, maybe we can slow him down a little bit, but he's super experienced, been around forever. It's also worth noting that, you could be terrified. Feel free to be absolutely terrified of the fact that he hit 10 out of 16 threes against BYU. You'd be crazy if that didn't scare you. But you should know that coming into that game, over his past 6 games, Mark Sears, he was just 5 of 35 on three-pointers, just 14% in his 6 previous games before he just went off for 10 out of 16. I don't think you're going to see him taking that many threes, and I don't think you're going to see him hitting them nearly at that kind of rate. At least I sure as hell hope not, because it'll be a long night for Duke if that happens. Mark Sears is a very nifty dribbler. He is a very smart creator. He knows what he's doing with the ball in his hands. He's one of those guys. He has gravity on the court. He draws your attention, draws the defense to himself, and then he creates opportunities for his teammates really well. As I mentioned, more than 5 assists per game. Now, he has 2 backcourt mates that you definitely need to talk about. They're both youngsters. The starting shooting guard, the guy who plays alongside him at the start, is LeBaron Filion. He's just a freshman, 6'4", but he's only 177 pounds. Not a big physical guy. Hits about 30% from 3. He's, again, a fairly crafty ball player with the ball in his hands. He finds shots for himself in the lane. He's pretty good at getting his teammates set up, averages more than 3 assists per game. But the more dangerous guy, the guy that you need to focus on more, is Aiden Holloway. He is a sophomore. He transferred over from Auburn. Can I just pause for a second and say, what kind of a world do we live in that someone would play at Auburn as a freshman and then transfer to Alabama? And he played a lot for Auburn last year. It wasn't like he didn't get... Like if Isaiah Evans turns around and transfers to UNC, it's just going to be like the worst thing that ever happened.
Right.
Aiden Holloway basically did that to the Auburn fan base by transferring over to Alabama. Aiden Holloway is an elite shooter. Dude can light it up from the perimeter. He hit 42% of his threes in the season. And get this, Don, we talked about sort of that magic number, 200 three-pointer. Does a guy attempt 200 three-pointers in the season, which is a ton. Con Knippel and Tyrese Proctor are right up around that area, 200 three-pointers. Aiden Holloway has more than 200 three-pointers, but here's the thing. As I mentioned, he's like their 6th man. He only plays about 20 minutes a game. Can you imagine Con and Tyrese playing, a third fewer minutes, or like half, not half as many minutes, but, reduced by about, 40% or so, and still taking as many three-pointers? I mean, wow. Aiden Holloway is just shooting and shooting and shooting. It's worth noting that, like Mark Sears, Aiden Holloway is a bit smaller. He's only 6'1". only weighs like less than 180. There are going to be plenty of times where Sears and Holloway will be on the floor together, and Alabama's going to be way, way smaller than Duke when that happens. Speaking of size, though, they do have two very good bigs, does Alabama. The starting power forward and center are Grant Nelson and Cliff Murray. Cliff is 6'11, 250. He is a load inside. Now, you may recall his name from the offseason. He had been at Rutgers for 4 years. He entered the transfer portal, and there was a bidding war for him. And UNC, North Carolina, was one of the teams very involved in Cliff Murray.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the exact number. The rumors are Cliff Murray got like 1.7, 1.9, maybe
two was the big rumor from UNC.
Yeah, $2 million that Cliff Murray got to go play basketball at Alabama this year. And frankly, I don't know that he's really worth it. I mean, he's averaging 8 points per game, 6.6 rebounds per game. He blocks some shots, not a lot of block shots, but he's a space eater on the inside. He's going to take up some room. I think the far more interesting big man for them is Grant Nelson. Dude's a stretch. He is a stretch four. He can handle the ball outside. He will start on the perimeter and dribble and take you inside. He can also shoot from three. He has this season, his 3-point shooting percentage is not as good as it's been in past years, but this is a guy who's capable of burying 3-pointers on you. You cannot leave him alone out there. And he'll also go inside and bang with you on the inside. Like, he has no fear about going down there in the post, especially off the dribble. And he's probably their best shot blocker. I think Grant Nelson is a hell of a player, and it's going to be a fascinating. He will match up with Cooper Flagg. It's going to be a really interesting matchup between those two guys. Two guys who both have good size, good perimeter skills. Cooper's clearly better. I mean, I'm being very clear-eyed about Grant Nelson, but this is a really interesting matchup. And with a lot of teams, you go, oh, what are they going to do? How are they going to cover Cooper? I think it is abundantly clear that Grant Nelson is probably capable of at least pretending to cover Cooper. He'll even have a couple inches on him because Grant Nelson is 6'11", 230 pounds. And again, a fifth-year senior who's been around the block, seen it all many, many times.
To go back to your question about what kind of pace I feel like Duke should play, I feel like it's got to be closer to our pace, which, again, it feels slow compared to the number one fastest team in the country. But if you think about it, we are, like you said, we are able to speed it up a bit. And the times we do speed it up, we still win for the most part. The couple times, I feel like Alabama has only been under 70 possessions twice this year. And one of them was a loss to Purdue, where it felt like they couldn't get anything going, and they really panicked because of the fact that they couldn't speed up against Purdue. Purdue kind of held them down, and because of that, those extra possessions, those extra shots weren't there for them to shoot back into the lead. Naturally, they score under 80 points in that game. For us, getting above 70 possessions is still fine. I don't think we need to be going towards 80, possessions in a game, which is what Alabama likes to do. But if we're at 70, 68, 70, 71, I feel that's still part of our range, and that's us kind of stretching a little bit, but it's still going to keep us within our range.
I'm going to tell you right now, this game will not be played at 69 or 7. Like, I'm hoping Duke keeps it to about 75, 74, 75, somewhere in that ballpark. St. Mary's played them the other day, and there were only 70 possessions in that game. But St. Mary's is literally like one of the 3 or 4 slowest teams in the country on offense. Like, St. Mary's whole game plan is we're going to hold. It's a 30-second shot clock. We're going to hold it for 28 seconds. Like, that's what they do.
But at the same time,
they couldn't get Alabama under 70 possessions.
At the same time, you can run a track meet all day if you're hitting shots. If you're not hitting shots, what do you like to do? You slow the ball down to try and get back into your flow by running your offense. And also, if another team is hot, sometimes teams slow down. Have you noticed every single time that we play teams, they like to slow us down, right? We're the ones that we are trying to get into the car and rev up our engine, and the other team is slowing us down because we're hitting so many shots and they want to take the ball away from us. So it's a tit for tat. It's going to be a chess game, and how that happens is going to start out fast, I think. But I think it might, if Duke wants to bring it down to their level, they have an advantage. And with our defense, we do have that advantage in the fact that our defense is better, and maybe we'll slow them down at times.
Yeah, exactly. Our defense does tend to force teams to play a lot slower than they're used to. The other thing I wonder about regarding the pace is, look, John Shire has been very willing to use his bench all year long. Well, now that we're getting deep into the NCAA tournament, you know, John's counting on his starters as much as possible. Tyrese played 37 minutes. Cooper played 36. Khan played 35. Sion played 32 in this game. We got, less than 48 hours from actually it's about 44 hours or so, 43, I don't know, from the end of the game last night to the start of the game tomorrow. These are young guys. I know they're good at recovery, but Tyrese and Cooper playing 36, 37 minutes against a physical Arizona team. They played the entire second half. They looked a little tired out there at times. I'm sorry, not Arizona, Alabama's plan is going to be to come in and make them run because, they had an easier game against BYU. Their guys didn't have to play nearly as much. The only guy who even played 30 minutes against BYU was Mark Sears. No one else played more than 28, and Sears only played 30. So, that's a consideration in Duke trying to keep it a little bit slower.
I also think you'll see in our rotations off the bench if we want to keep continuing making it a track meet or if we want to slow down a bit. If you want to slow down a bit, this is no disrespect to him. You bring in a Mason Gillis who's able to kind of defensively be able to grind some players down to a halt, especially the guy with the ball on the break. If you want to make it a track meet and you want to be able to provide offense, guess who is great at lighting things up on transition? Slim. If when Slim was on his roll, right, he was doing a lot in transition because he can get down the court quickly, he can get to his space, and our guys can find him with the basketball. We can spread the floor out in transition. So if Alabama allows that, you may see that. But again, if we want to make have more defensive minded setups, especially given the personnel that Alabama will have at any given time, you might see a Mason Gillis. You might see Malik for a couple of games. I'm sorry, a couple of minutes here and there. But I think that's where you'll start to kind of see the chess pieces that John Shire likes to move. Jason, before we get out of here, I want to mention some of the things to watch in this game. We've talked about actually quite a bit of them in this discussion, but one thing is left to be said. Toughness. This Alabama team is a tough team. It's going to require a tough team to beat them. And the teams that are able to get over on Alabama are the teams that play tougher than they do. And I'm not just talking about being physical. I'm not just talking about winning the rebounding battle. I'm not talking about how we defend. I'm just talking about overall want it. We are 40 minutes away from a potential trip to San Antonio in the Final Four. There's a few guys on this team, obviously, that know what that feeling's like to come up just short. And I know that Tyrese Proctor and to a lesser extent Caleb Love and Neil Begovic and even Spencer Hubbard and Stanley Borden are going to be telling the team this is what it takes. Mason Gillis knows what it's like to be short of the promised land that you achieve, right? He was in the national title game last year. He's going to know what it means to get to this point. And I still think about Sion James and the fact that he is seeing. Have you seen Jurassic World where they kind of go, hey, you like this dinosaur, he's seeing all this for the first time, and once he finds out where the food chain is, you don't want to be there when that happens. Sion James is that guy. Sion James is experiencing all this for the first time, and when he figures out, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be, look out, world. And again, we saw a glimpse of that against Arizona. So I'm counting on these guys to bring the level of toughness that is required to win the East Regional and get to the Final Four. And I hope that all of you there who are going to Prudential Center, bring it for Jason and I, because we cannot be there. So you guys are tasked with bringing that in our absence. To those of you down in reunions, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Don't just give us the headlines, give us the vibes on campus on Saturday night as this game goes on.
By the way, we do not have a final score, but I would like to point out that at the moment, the Duke women are beating the UNC Tar Heels with a little less than 2 minutes to go in the game. And according to ESPN's game tracker, Duke is a 99.9% chance to win this game against UNC. The women will be advancing also to the Elite Eight in Birmingham. Wow. Kind of amazing to have two teams doing that at the same time.
Put a bonnet in that, Jason, because I'm as we've been talking, I've been watching this game. So you're giving away a little bit here. At where I am right now, we are down to the final 2 minutes, and it's now a 11-point lead for the Blue Devils. Let's hope they hang on, because we would love to talk about them on the next episode of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We are going to get out of here. It's been a long one. For Jason, I am Donald. Thank you, John Barrow, again for chiming in on the refereeing stuff, and thanks to all of you out there for continuing to provide your headlines again after the game on Saturday. Who knows? Jason and I might be back after that, but we will definitely be back for a full recap of everything, no matter what. So let's go, Duke. It's now time for the Duke band to play us out and take us home.